what I called this was competency versus procedures, and where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line with this, right? And so just a little bit of background on this. We're a small veteran-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned business. I've been around since May of 2008. We work in many, many different industries today, probably predominantly in the petrochem and refining areas. More so, we got our start in the utility industry and the nuclear side of things. And I had worked my way up through operations management all the way through at a nuclear power facility over the many years. And I ended up being the director of the fleet policy procedure program for Constellation Energy before they were purchased by Exelon. So that's just a little snapshot of my my career. I could go into a lot more length there, but we got a lot of stuff to discuss. Our mission today is to have and take procedures and how to human factor these things to maximize the comprehension of the people that are actually performing work, such we have tools to help supplement their knowledge. And as I said, supplement their knowledge in such a way that we can really improve the overall consistency, quality, safety, production, lower our costs, and all those different things by the use of the knowledge that we obtain through our careers, along with the use of a procedure, right? So what we hope to kind of accomplish today is try to figure out where is the line kind of drawn in the sand between here. And so what I tried to do was, here's my problem statement. When performing procedure or work instruction quality assessments, which we do a lot of, we get hired by many different companies to come in, look at procedures, try to help them with some of the programmatic process areas, technical issues with procedures, just performance-related problems that tie back with procedures. And so during these assessments, it's routinely noted that the content found in the procedures that we're assessing or the work instructions that we're assessing is not consistently written at a level of detail necessary to really support safety, quality, production, and sustainable compliance. Impacts resulting from an aging workforce is even further raising the significance of this problem, right? When the balance between crediting competency or developing high-quality human factor procedures is called into question, the feedback I get provided by the staff that we're there to support is, oh, well, our staff is competent. Staff is competent, right? Statements such as the one you see on the screen, I've actually found written in procedures that are somewhere near the header area. You'll see there's a statement. It says competency level, and there'll be some alphanumeric number there. And then it basically has a statement that says personnel are assessed, certified, and declared competent in all safe work management requirements and in the specific use of this procedure. Meanwhile, I'm there because obviously they're having problems because people don't hire us. They're doing it well. They don't need us, right? So we're basically there for problems. So I'm thinking, so how can this statement end up in a procedure and have such a gap between what they believe competency can stand for as a result of also the need to have a procedure, right? So in the following slides are excerpts I took from OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Administration, requirements for 29 CFR Part 1910. So I try to pick one regulatory agency and kind of look at what did they call competent and what do they have to say with it, right? And so we're going to look at that. So if you look at OSHA standards in 1910 for regulatory requirements for 1910, there are 17 different areas that they actually, if you search on 1910, you'll find the word competent listed in these regulatory requirements. And so what I did on the screen for you is I took like 3 of the 17 comments that I thought was pretty interesting, because look at what the regulator says from OSHA, right? So it says a competent person means a person who, because of training and experience, is capable of identifying hazardous or dangerous conditions. Obviously, this is 1910 is looking at occupational safety, right? So you can see there's a certain flavor to that. But then look at the second bullet I have on the screen. It says competent means possessing the skills, knowledge, and experience and judgment to perform assigned tasks or activities satisfactorily as determined by the employer. I think that's probably a pretty good definition from what I've seen. I mean, that's the feeling I get from the client, is that that's what their belief is, right? Another statement I saw in the OSHA, and again, you see this in almost all 17 areas, and it's worded just a little bit differently from one regulation to another. but it says a competent person. One is who's capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in their surroundings or working conditions that are unsatisfactory or unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, and who has the authorization to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. So if you just read the last part of that, it's someone who's basically performing actions and they have the authority to actually take prompt mitigating actions to correct things. Someone that says is competent, right? So then further along in lines is that one of the things I picked up on as I was reading through 1910 is the fact that they also use the word qualified. And what happened is that if you count how many times the word qualified shows up in 1910, it actually shows up 32 different times, which is kind of interesting, right? And so when you think about qualified, they actually have a brief statement in there and says an excellent example of the need for qualified personnel is electrical work. Whereas a competent person, notice they bring in the word competent, but then they expand upon it and say a competent person would be able to identify electrical components and have a general knowledge of electrical hazards. So that's kind of what they feel the competent person does, right? But a qualified person would also have the additional knowledge, skills, and training to do specialized electrical work, right? 1910 further goes in there, and as again, I went through and kind of picked up where I saw some commonality in some of the statements they made. Qualified person means one with a recognized degree or professional certificate and extensive knowledge and experience. Notice extensive knowledge and experience in the subject field, who is capable of design, analysis, evaluation, and specifications in the subject work, right? Then it goes on, and I thought this was probably one of the key ones here. Qualified person means a person with specific training. Notice in the previous, and when we were talking about competent, it kind of touched on the word training here. Where was it now? It's the knowledge, judgment, it's the capable. I thought I had it in here. Identify. Oh, here he is. Competent person means a person because of training and experience. So they kind of touch on training there. But here they come right out and say specific training, knowledge, and experience in the area for which the person has a responsibility and the authority to control. Right? So, you can see that both between competency and qualification, man, they are very, very closely intertwined with one another, right? To be qualified to work on or near exposed, energized person, the person must be trained and familiar with the skills and techniques. Qualified person is one who has received training in and has demonstrated skills and knowledge. So it's almost like they've demonstrated their competency. So it seems like qualification ups the bar a little bit. OSHA takes the qualification up as a higher level of a higher level of competency when you go to look at it, right? Now, for this presentation, I use OSHA regulations as the focal point for my discussion on competency and qualification. When looking at the two OSHA regulations from 1910, I found something missing, right? And this is the big key. What's missing, right? If you look at competent, it talks about the means of possessing skills, knowledge, and experience versus qualified, which it says a qualified person means a person with specific training, knowledge, and experience. But notice for both competent and qualified, there's no mention of risk of human performance failure. Both statements assume the skills and knowledge necessary to be successful. There's no doubt. It almost seems like when they're talking about these two levels of people, that when they perform tasks, they're always successful, right? And so, and with some regards, when I look at the procedure problems that we find very routinely, which really capitalize on the problems with what I would call level of detail of the procedure, many times I find the level of detail very lacking. And why is that? Matter of fact, very lacking to the point that many steps tell you what to do, but they don't tell you how to do anything. They just tell you what to do. Why is it? Because there's a heavy reliance on competency. Nukes like the nuclear, commercial nuclear likes to call it skill of the craft, right? And we take great lengths to basically credit that skill of the craft. But when we credit that, what is missing, right? So the question becomes, can we or should we assume that a competent or qualified staff are free from human error? They're just not going to make mistakes. And so I was teaching a class over in Nigeria, believe it or not, of all places. And this was the point. There was a step in a procedure that talked about open up all the valves. And I said, so is there a list of all these valves? No. And I said, so as a matter of fact, they wanted to close all these vent valves. And they said, close all the vent valves, right? They call them bleeds. And I said, is there a list of all these? And they said, no. And I said, well, what is the system? What is the process volume going through the system? And they said, hydrogen. I said, 100% pure hydrogen? So if the valve was left open, you basically have like a blowtorch coming out the valve? Yeah. But our staff is competent. And I said, well, that's good. But then I guess, are you telling me that because of the fact that you're taking credit for their competency, are you telling me that they never make mistakes? Have you ever left one of those vent valves open? Oh yeah, we had many years ago. Didn't seem like that really made sense to me, right? So here's an example. Here's some vague guidance. I've taken some for procedures. They've been through a management of change review. They've been signed off technically. They were blessed off completely, and they're all well and good. And I looked at them and I said, well, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense. So these gas oils may contain high concentrations of H2S, hydrogen sulfide, a poisonous and flammable gas. Appropriate safety and environmental precautions must be taken. Anybody know what the appropriate safety precautions should be? Is everyone going to know the exact same thing? Pump readiness. We're getting ready to start a pump, and it says verified pump is ready to be placed back in service by performing the following. All bleeders and vents are closed and bull plugged. Is there a list of those? Do I need a list of those? Is a competent person, everybody going to know which ones they are? Does everybody know what the word bull plug means? Be able to do that. Verify the flanges have been inspected for proper gaskets and alignment. I suppose to go look between the flanges and see if there's something stuck between there, or is there something else I'm supposed to look at? Am I supposed to look at the documented maintenance records to verify that this stuff was done? Oh, verify the flange of pump bolts have been hammer tested for tightness. Am I supposed to hammer test them? Or am I just verifying that someone else has, right? All pressure gauges are of the correct rating and proper installed and secured. So am I supposed to know the proper pressure rating for every gauge I'm supposed to look at, and that they're properly installed? And is that because they just aren't leaking? And that they're secure? Be able to do that. Remove the glycol from the generator radiators. Be sure to dispose of the glycol in a manner that follows all EPA rules for the area. Now, is that any area? This was out in Blythe, California, by the way. So it's like, okay, and these were wind turbines. And so am I supposed to know all the EPA rules? I mean, I'm a qualified craft person. Am I supposed to know all the EPA rules for the area that I'm in? Ensure the lighting fixtures are working correctly. Now, is that a certain lumen, or is that the fact that I can actually look up and I see light? Right? Check all the area safety showers for proper operation. Close all the drain valves. Oh, it does say use the initial valve lineup attached to this procedure. They will do that. Monitor the converter bed temperatures closely. I know what closely is, right? And purging early if necessary. to maintain bed temperatures. Ending the purge early may cause a main stack SO2 environmental violation. If the drum level gets extremely low, now that's just not low, right? We're not talking empty, but we're talking extremely low, right? Then I need to open this manual feed water valve. If the accumulator pre-charge pressure was found to be depleted, this should be monitored more frequently to ascertain if the piston is leaking. Anybody know how frequently that is? You guys kind of see my point? Competency, but yet we have a procedure, and the procedure's not really helping you much. It's just trying to show you the points where competency kind of falls into question. So as I was saying, is that I find often that we, like human beings, if anybody watches Marvel movies, we're all like Avengers. We are always going to live, no matter how bad we get stomped on and we get beat around, that we're always going to come back for the next movie, be able to do that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of OSHA data that comes up and says that's not necessarily true. And so I think it's important to understand that the system, when you look at human performance and look at the pure definition of it, the human performance is defined as a system of processes. There's values and their behaviors and ultimately results that help determine the performance. God bless the results, right? Because the results could be good, bad, and otherwise, right? So when we look at the principles of human performance, we have to make sure that the processes, the controls we have in place take into account that people do make mistakes. And you can't even happen to watch the news today, which I can't even turn on anymore, right? Without seeing a lot of people making mistakes, right? Error is predictable. Organizations can influence the behavior positively and negatively, right? I mean, many times where we have like whatever the safety of the month is, right? Maybe it's electrical safety or office safety. We'll see new posters put up as we walk to the cafeteria, and everything is there to try to help reinforce that safety culture to be able to do that. And then you can be in the office area and see some supervisor walk past this extension cord that's going across the hallway between two cubes because someone lost power to something, and can't look down and shake their head and keep right on walking, and then look at it and say, well, there you go. There is a behavior that was just reinforced. Say one thing, but do something else, right? Behaviors obviously can be reinforced, right? And accidents events are avoidable. So these are the principles for human performance. Everybody getting me so far? Everybody's good? So let's look at this Swiss cheese for a minute, right? So some people may discredit the Swiss cheese model. I mean, you'll see on the internet that sometimes there's like a back and forth about the validity and value of this. I personally find it pretty good, right? If you look at it, every slice of cheese, basically a Swiss cheese, is notorious to have holes in it, right? And so every slice of cheese would be like a barrier that we can put in place to try to help us stay away from events. So for example, training, right? Procedures, instructions, pre-job briefs, job safety hazard reviews, job safety analysis. So the litany can go on and on. All those things act as barriers to help us prevent the event. Whereas what this graphic is trying to depict here is no matter how many barriers you put in, there are times when the holes are still going to all align, and that arrow is going to make it all the way to event. Why is that? Because previously I said in human factors, we believe that error is predictable to be able to do that. And people are going to make mistakes to be able to do that. So we need to try to give them the best tools, the best training that we can afford to give, especially in our economy today, such that we can try to do this to add these layers of defense. This way the losses can be prevented. Okay? Now, so if error is predictable, there's some statistics. So when I was looking at OSHA's website, trying to put all this little webinar thing together for lunch, I came across some statistics. All right. And I would assume that most of these people, if not all of them, in the area where they work, they were considered to be competent and are qualified, except for there was 15,000 people who came into work between 2015 and 20 that could have been defined as competent, but left with one part of their body missing that they didn't have when they started work in the morning. 15,000 people, right? There was almost 47,000 people alone, competent, I'm sure, qualified people, who ended up still in the hospital. There was over 4,300 people didn't make it home at all. People do make mistakes. Error is predictable, and accidents and events are avoidable. You all agree? Right? So, where am I coming with this? Where am I going with this? All right. You can Google this thing. You can see that there is all kinds of data on this. But I feel like no matter what training I give, I got to talk about this aspect on it. It's called performance modes, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a little video real quickly. It's only a couple minutes long on performance modes. As we perform work, any of us, from one step to the next, we can move through all three of these performance modes. So when we perform work, there's three performance modes. Whether we have a procedure in hand or we're doing it from our memory, whatever it may be, there's three performance modes that we all move in from one step to the next in everything that we do. When you look at skill base basically assumes that definition wise is that you're qualified. Remember we talked about competent, qualified. So they assume that you're qualified to perform this work. You have a procedure and you have been trained on that procedure. those three things. So it's then when we say train on that procedure, it could be that someone walked it down in the field with you, someone just sat and explained some of the little intricate details about the procedure. Doesn't mean that you have to have like classroom sit down training. It just means someone has helped you understand that procedure. If you meet those three criteria, you fall on the skill base, and you have an error rate of 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000 chance that you're going to have a mistake and you're going to have a problem. Right? That's where, it's an excellent place to be, right? To be able to do that. Now, you move up the scale a little bit. Rule-based. Rule-based says you're qualified, you have a procedure, but you've not been trained on that procedure. It's assumed because of your qualifications that you can basically take this procedure, you can follow it, you're going to understand all the little intricate details, and you will be successful in what you do, and your error rate changes to 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000. So between rule-based and skill-based is really where you want to be. But notice they all had the P word in there, procedure. We all had the Q word in there, qualified, right, to be able to do that. Now you move to knowledge base. Knowledge base basically says you're qualified to go perform the work that you're going to do, but you have no procedure. Or you have procedure that has observable errors in it where you have to make decisions in the field. For example, right? Slowly open a valve. If necessary, do this. If required, do this. It's where the procedure basically lays it out. Close all the valves. Open all the bleeds. It's where you have to use your knowledge and experience, your competency with the procedure to get the work done. But look at your error rate, 1 in 2 to 1 in 10. It's literally a flip of a coin almost, right? Now, skill-based, qualified, procedure, trained. Rule-based, qualified, have a procedure. Workers should never be in knowledge-based performance mode when executing procedures, right? Qualified, no procedure as I decide. Knowledge-based mistakes result from what they call trial and error, right? In these cases, insufficient knowledge about how to perform a task results in the development of a solution that is incorrectly expected to work. So they basically have assumptions and say, okay, well, I guess slow means this, right? Where slow could mean maybe 1 turn a minute. Who knows what the difference is? But then what happens is your assumptions could be wrong. Why should we care about this? Ultimately, when we are trying to decide between tasks performed that are reliant on a staff's competency or when a task should be supported with a procedure or work instructions, we have to remember what we're trying to accomplish. What are we trying to accomplish? Effectively, we're trying to manage knowledge-based performance. That's the ultimate goal. They're trying to find the correct balance between knowledge and then the procedure, right? And trying to figure out where that is. Where can we have certain tasks that we don't use a procedure at all? When can we rely on our training? But it's about trying to manage knowledge-based performance and the error rate of 1 in 2 to 1 in 10. Everybody kind of get that? All right, so let's look at competency versus procedures or both, right? How do we fix this? How do we fix it? Obviously, from the examples provided, there's room for improvement, right? So I showed you some examples. So what are some considerations you can use to help guide you in the decision-making process of when crediting competency / I would call qualification, or what we would like to call the what to do direction versus providing additional details on how to do direction or both? And look at. So one of the things you can look at is the detail. Lots of times the devil's in the details. We need to assume that there is a certain level of understanding before someone performs the work, right? So an appropriate level of detail is necessary for what they call an inexperienced, although qualified person with really no direct supervision, right? So you got to look and say, hey, look, I got to write, if I write these steps, I got to write steps that are there that can basically meet this level of detail. You're not writing it for someone that was doing landscaping work and now they're overhauling a multi-million-dollar pump. They'd be able to do that. I mean, you're going to write an encyclopedia and you're going to have a problem with that. Too much detail to be able to do that. So we got to find some, there's got to be some acceptable experience level that has to be out there, right? Now, the other thing to look at is the fact that we got to also assume that, there are certain things, if you call yourself an electrician or a mechanic or an operator or a system technician or IT technician, whatever you want to call yourself, that if you have that label with your name in there, that there's probably some training that you've been through, you're qualified to do certain things. And so by that nature of the fact, There are certain things that are basic skills that you have acquired that is associated with the area that you work in to be able to do that. Now, if you see the industry likes to call it, what they call it skill of the craft, right? They say, hey, these are discipline-specific skills held by the staff, and they can be performed consistently error-free, independent of the risk of human performance, and do not rely on written instructions or procedures to make you successful. I like that because this is one of the few discussion points where they actually bring in the fact about independent of human performance risks. At least they acknowledge that it's there. Notice as you go through all the OSHA stuff, it just assumes that we're always going to be successful. Just do it. If you're qualified, or if you're qualified, or if you happen to be competent in what you do, then you should always be successful when you look at it, right? Complexity of the task. Sometimes as the task complexity rises, right, the level of detail should also go up, especially with a large number of actions are involved. Individual instructions should remain simple as possible. Another way of looking at this complexity task, sometimes it's just a change in technology. I've seen the change in technology, which is supposed to be there to help you, actually create problems because of the change management of that. It's been problematic. It will do that. Frequency. When you look at the frequency of a task, as the task frequency raises, the level of detail can go down, right? But you also have to take into consideration complacency, right? How often does complacency lead to error? Quite often. Everybody follow me so far? Consistency. How important that we get it so that all our staff does it the same way and we get the same results. And overall, we all end up being successful because everybody that's performing this work is successful. So collectively, we're all good. Able to do that. Sometimes today, I find the consistency is extremely important that we get it. Be able to do that. Last but not least, consequence of error. Yet again, I see constantly that the consequence of the error is always underestimated or extremely. Maybe always is too strong of a word, but it's extremely underestimated. We all think, human being wise, that we are just better than what we really are, right? For some of us in the industry, the Joe S's in the world and everywhere else, that basically we do this for a living. We look at it, Dwayne Coffey that's on board here with some of you guys. There's others out there, I'm sure, is that our businesses or the things that we're involved in is because of people making mistakes, to be able to do that. That's why we have a job. We help them come in there, fix these things. And I'm telling you is that I really wish sometimes I didn't have that. It would be okay if you all did it right. Sometimes. I've been involved in a number of fatality investigations. I wish I never had been involved in. Right? Been involved. So consideration should also be given to avoid a reliance on competency qualification for the execution of the task with a probability of error. I've seen places where they actually do risk assessments, and the probability of error was listed as very likely or somewhat likely. And yet, I found steps in the procedure that look like the ones I just went through with you. But yet, the document was listed as risk sensitive, right? And the consequences of the impact of them screwing it up was either health and safety, public involvement, environmental, financial. All these things were at risk, and they still kept going right down. Because why? We've always done it successfully in the past. If a task performer has the potential to carry out steps, especially from memory, that would be considered a critical step, defined as a step or series of steps or action that, if performed improperly, will cause irreversible harm to plant equipment or people, or will significantly impact plant operation, consideration should be given to avoid performing this step or steps from memory, or otherwise relying on competency qualification as a success path, as it does not take into the possibility of human error. I see this routinely, right? Now, the commercial nukes will go so far as making sure in the procedure they identify the critical steps, even to the point that they provide this guidance. Critical steps for a procedure are identified during a task pre-job briefing. When preparing an executed critical step, the performer stops to review the situation, ensuring the current conditions match the expected. The expected results of the step performance are understood. The correct component is verified before the critical step is performed. The focus is on the task at hand, right? The performer understands and uses human performance tools planned to accomplish the step to work it safely and correctly. The performer verifies that the results are as expected. This comes from the commercial nuclear industry, right? I see steps like this in petrochemical refining done and the non-nuclear side of stuff completely from memory. But realize what was the definition again? If performed improperly, will cause irreversible harm to plant equipment or people. Irreversible. And everybody understands what irreversible means, right? Additionally, we want to avoid tasks that perform strictly from the use of competency and qualification that could result in embedded latent errors. Man, this has been a hot ticket the last month or two in the work that we've been performing for some of our clients. I have more than once found a latent error that's been in a procedure, and there is some guidance that has been in there for 8 to 10 years before it decided to explode. 8 to 10 years. You could go to chemicalsafetyboard.gov and see videos on latent errors that were sitting there dormant for numerous years, just waiting for someone to open a valve or do something that was in knowledge base. 1 to 2 to 1 to 10 error rate. And it didn't just kill them, it killed other people and damaged a bunch of equipment, right? To be able to do that. So we got to remember that latent errors are problems which are under certain conditions will contribute to an error occurring. Latent errors may lie dormant for some time, but given a certain set of circumstances become evident. In a sense, latent errors set the scene to make it more likely that an active error will occur. Procedures can provide the necessary checks and balance to ensure verifications are performed that confirm the work was performed properly. Right? So the idea is that how do you prevent the latent errors? Many times it's in the procedure that they didn't have or they weren't following. Because a procedure, once you perform a task, you can have a step there as a conditional step or maybe just as a verification step to verify that the work you just performed was done properly. Post-maintenance testing, for example. You do post-maintenance testing to verify that it. This way, you're not waiting to the next time that you operate the pump to find out the breaker's broken or something along those lines. Right? In conclusion, industry has relied on the skills and knowledge of their staff to provide consistent results. As the workforce is retiring faster than the industry has experienced in many years, as technology improves, an experience gap is developing and growing. Less experienced staff are relying on procedures that in many cases have been updated to reflect current operating and regulatory conditions. I have a customer in Carville, Louisiana at a petrochemical plant that missed one step in a procedure and it cost them $50 million. $50 million. When I walked through the grounds looking at the destructive damage that was caused from the accident that had occurred, you know what the comment was from the plant manager that struck me pretty funny, which really was nothing funny about this at all. He says, you know what, Steve, we have typically about 170 employees, of which we have 130 people that have less than 3 years now. He said, our biggest problem is the new people are trying to follow our procedures. That's our biggest problem. The procedures haven't been written, haven't been used for years because we had a very senior staff that stopped using them. They didn't need them because of their proficiency, right? When developing procedures, reliance on the procedure performer to make the right decision when in knowledge base or what to do level of detail is risky and should be evaluated carefully. Consideration must be given for every task and every step. Is there the correct balance between competency and the level of detail needed to perform the actions consistently error-free? If a task was performed without written guidance in the past, It does not automatically mean you can expect to be that lucky today. Do not assume, oh, we train on that. It would be best if you verify before accepting. Assumptions that everyone has been trained behind you are not always the case. I've seen that quite often. As I interview someone as an inspector, and I get, well, Steve, we train on that because I'm asking questions about the level of detail. First thing I do is go to the training department and I look for the lesson plans, the qualification of the people who provided the instruction, the frequency of how often the instruction is provided, and some deterministic process that was used to confirm that the people understood what they were taught and verified that they could do the performance as written. You know what I come up with? Nothing. Nothing. Oh, at the last plant I worked at, we did train on it. And I hate to tell you, buddy, but you're not at the last plant that you used to work at. So anyway, I hope this was, I tried to give you, I mean, we could probably talk collectively as a group, and I would love to do it. We could have this open seminar where we could just talk about all the experiences that we have and probably talk for hours about this subject, right? I know I didn't give you a definite answer to this, but hopefully I gave you some thought or some insight, because this competency thing I see as a growing problem. It's been around as a problem for many, many years. I see it growing as a problem today, even more so. And I thought enough of it from the training that I've been teaching worldwide now, because we've been doing classes in Singapore and Guyana and Nigeria and Mozambique and different places. And I'm finding as we spread ourselves out as a company that this issue isn't just with my utilities here in the United States that I grew up with, you know, and I've been a part of. And now the refineries and petrochem that we do a lot of work with. But I find that this is a problem that spans the globe. It's a human performance issue. And just because there's human beings in other parts of the world, do not think that they are not susceptible to this same issue, if not even worse so, be able to do that. So anyway, I hope that this kind of gave you some insight or maybe reaffirm what you already knew. I don't know. But anyway, we wanted to share this with you. We have what we call Procedure Professional Association certification classes coming up in July, where we actually get into this for 20 hours for this, 20 hours for this class. It's a great class to take if you're interested. We have one in the fall also, but this isn't the reason. I didn't do this seminar or lunch and learn as a sales thing for you guys. That's not the point of it. We're just trying to share with you some things that we have as we go along. Our information's on the last slide. We have a PDF version of this that we can provide you. And I really hope that this was some value. Any questions from anybody? We'll open the floor to questions and dialogue.
Yeah, we have one from Patricia Lindstrom, who asked if you could repeat the level of detail considerations, number 3 and number 4.
Number 3 and number 4. Complexity of the task. And when we talk about complexity, sometimes we're not just talking like a large volume of steps. Sometimes that's complex. Sometimes the lack of detail that's provided actually adds to a certain level of not complexity and anxiety on top of it. You know, I mean, sometimes when you look at that, you know, the lack of detail makes your head hurt. So that adds to the complexity of things. Complexity could be a change in technology. For example, when I was in the Navy, I used to be a mechanic many, many years ago before I went through my career. And as I was a mechanic, I used to do pump alignments. And we used this thing called a dial indicator. It was like a little gauge, had a little springy point on it. You guys know dial indicators? And it had a metal bar on it with a magnetic base. I was quite good at doing it. Matter of fact, not to pat myself on the shoulder, right? I was doing an observation for Oglethorpe Power, actually outside of, I'll do a name drop there and outside of Atlanta. And I saw a 24-year-old mechanic actually use a laser alignment tool. I thought, how cool is that? A laser doing this now, to be able to do that. And so I was reading the instructions inside the box, And I was joking with him because I've been watching him work for a couple of days. And I told John, I said, John, you know, the instructions here are kind of complex. You sure you can do this, right? And he's like, Steve, man, you just move stuff around and this green light comes on. Once the green light comes on, man, you're good, you know? And he says, what did you use? And I said, I use this thing as a dial indicator. He said, oh, well, I was in tech school. When you first walked in the building, you had these glass cases, you know, where they had like trophies and things, and there was a dial indicator in there, right? And I thought, yeah, you smart son of a gun, you know? So I was feeling all 59 years old there at that point, you know? So anyway, 35 years older than the guy, you know? So anyway, I thought that was it. So complexity can be the change in technology, right? Gave my mom, my brother gave my mother, 82-year-old, a smartphone. He became instantly her help desk, you know? So, you know, all those things can happen, you know, as you go. So complexity and frequency is a double-edged sword. I've seen people where they're completely mindless in what they're doing because they do it 3 or 4 times a shift. They're not even engaging their brains anymore, you know? And so what happens is they're just like a machine. And so the frequency can be very, very destructive. Did that answer your question? All right, folks. Well, I hope you had a good lunch. I'm sorry I couldn't provide any food with that, but I hope I gave some food for thought, you know? So anyway, thanks again for being here with us, and we hope that we see you again. Take care.